Hi everyone, my name is Mia Ola, and today I'll be talking to you about the correlation between malaria and sickle cell anemia. So before we can analyze the correlation between these two diseases, I think it's important that we understand biologically what the diseases are and how they affect us. So malaria is a disease of the blood, and it's caused by a parasite called a plasmodium. And this plasmodium lives in red blood cells. So it's a living organism. And what happens, since it's a living organism, it will reproduce and keep making more and more plasmodium. What eventually happens is that the excess of plasmodium explodes the red blood cell. And this exploding is what causes the symptoms of malaria that we tend to think of. Sickle cell anemia is a little bit different. Even though it is a disease of the blood, it is a genetic disease. And what happens is this disease causes some of your red blood cells to be shaped like a crescent moon. And the reason behind this is because there is a problem with the hemoglobin gene. Hemoglobin is the molecule, so to say, that carries oxygen to different parts of your body in the red blood cell. So since this gene is defective, the blood cell has a different shape, and it is essentially a crescent moon. So even though these are both diseases of the blood, they're pretty different. But since they're both diseases of the blood, scientists have started to notice that there has been a correlation between the two in malaria deaths for those people that both have sickle cell disease and those that don't. So one study was analyzed at the La Quinta Hospital in between the years of 2015 and 2018. So what they found was that there was a malaria outbreak, and what they found was that patients that had sickle cell anemia had a 15% lower death rate than those that did not have sickle cell anemia. And you would think, oh, this is sickle cell is a disease, so that means that it causes symptoms and more people would die. Yes, that's true. But when there's a malaria outbreak, it actually was theorized that the patients that had sickle cell anemia had this kind of protection layer against malaria. So then scientists started to realize that there was a correlation, but for a long time, there was no reason as to why there was a correlation. Like, how did this happen? So in recent years, there have been a lot more studies and research about how they correlate and how they're related to each other. So that's what I did. I examined some of the research that has been out, and I correlated it with each other, and I started to find why malaria and sickle cell anemia could be related. So what I found, well, what researchers found that I analyzed, is that sickled cells usually produce more carbon dioxide. And this isn't a problem to us humans because we're much bigger bodies, we're much more tolerant to substances, and because if the substances, we need more of them essentially to be poisoned. So it's not a problem for humans, but remember, for someone that has malaria, they have a small, tiny organism living inside of their red blood cells. Since these red blood cells that are sickled emit carbon dioxide, they could be killed. So this level of carbon dioxide is theorized to be lethal to plasmodia. So that is one theory as to why red blood cells that are sickled could provide protection against malaria. Another reason why is because that your body has its own defense mechanism against sickled cells. So it's a theory that your body does what's called phagocytes, which means it engulfs its own cell in another cell. So your body basically eats its own red blood cell that's sickled. The reason that this could be so beneficial in preventing malaria is because if your body engulfs a cell that has a plasmodia in it, the malaria is also being killed. And it's hard to do that. So your body does it itself to the red blood cells naturally that are sickled. So it would also be eating essentially those plasmodium. And I think that this is important because it could lead to more research on how we can cure malaria and how there could be treatments available, not just for symptoms, but actually to treat the problem at its cause. One interesting thing about sickle cell anemia that's very important to note is that you can have the trait for sickle cell anemia and be what's called heterozygous, which means half of your red blood cells are sickled, but the other half are not. And this is inherited in a certain way. If one of your parents has the disease and one doesn't, you could have a chance to be what's called heterozygous and have half red blood cells that are sickled and half that are not. This is important because your body is still fighting itself against the malaria because it has sickle cells. So those two theories that we talked about, those sickle cells make carbon dioxide or they're engulfed by other cells. So your body is still fighting against malaria, but the other half of your red blood cells are normal, which causes no symptoms of sickle cell disease. So it is ideal for someone to be a heterozygous for this sickle cell anemia, which means they have both sickled and non-sickled cells because they get malaria protection and they don't have any symptoms of sickle cell anemia. So this heterozygous model could also be used to understand why malaria can be fought against essentially with these cells. And it can also be used to maybe make treatments for malaria and, keep your blood healthy with these half-sickled cells, with these half-sickled cells preventing against malaria, but also keep the rest of your blood healthy with normal red blood cells. So I think that this opens up a really cool door of how we could go about treating malaria and how maybe sickle cell anemia evolved as a trait that was helpful to prevent against malaria. So if we cure malaria, then we could essentially help with sickle cell anemia as well. So it's this circle that could really open up a whole bunch of possibilities for the future of medicine. So I appreciate you listening, and I hope you have a great day.